One particular case I remember with a mine was a young lieutenant who stepped backwards onto a mine, and when he came in on the helicopter, he didn't appear to be grossly damaged until we lifted him from the stretcher. And at that stage it was obvious that the mine had sheared most of his back away.
Because the mines contained pellets of lead, nails, anything that could be airborne when it was exploded, so that they had many, multiple fragment wounds. And so it might not just be an arm or a leg, it would be the whole body.
In our hospital, there was only one trained operating theatre nurse, and the rest of the lads were medical assistants trained as operating theatre technicians. I can recall that we had a farmer, a shoe salesman, fitter and turner, a couple of uni students who had been called up into national service and in 1 year had been trained as medical assistants and then operating theatre technicians. I think that it asked an awful lot of these young people, you know, to see such terrible wounds, and I think they acquitted themselves marvellously.
Many Australians, like many Americans, disagree with President Johnson's actions in Vietnam. But those who agree must wonder what Australia would do if there was a dramatic switch in American policy.
I hope there will be a corner of your mind and heart which takes cheer from the fact that you have an admiring friend, a staunch friend, that will be all the way with LBJ.
I recall going to bed and, about 1 o'clock in the morning, I hear the pop, 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 which was a little bit different. It sort of let me feel that they were incoming rounds, and sure enough they were, and they started landing somewhere around the task force area.
You don't usually put a mortar attack in unless you're going to do something else with it. So, you know, and the natural thing to do is put in a mortar attack as a precursor to an infantry assault.
I recall jumping out of bed, putting on my jungle patrol boots back to front on the wrong feet, racing down to the command post under the ground, and then just waiting and listening to all the radio reports of the various actions that were going on.
Well, the reaction to the task force base after the mortaring was that they sent out one of the other companies, B Company, to try and find out where the mortars had come from.
Noel and his company found a number of mortar positions, I think 3 recoilless rifle, 70mm gun and mortar positions. And we were ordered then next morning to go out and relieve Noel Ford because his company weren't equipped to stay out for an extended period of time.
On the 18th of August, just after we relieved B Company, outside the rubber where they'd found the base plates of the mortars, we moved off and towards the rubber.
Trees around about 6 to 9 inches across, trees about 20 feet high with a bit of green on the top, not a complete blanket.
The thing that was getting up everyone's nose on the way out was that we were missing the Cold Joy and Little Paddy concert, and we could hear grabs of sound from the concert as we were moving out.
I had the section on the extreme left of 11 Platoon. We'd probably gone into the rubber about somewhere about 100 metres, and we were hit with a fair bit of fire coming in on our section.
I believe that probably because of the volume of fire, that 11 Platoon, in fact, may have been overrun, and then I dispatched 10 Platoon around to the left flank to try and help get 11 Platoon out.
We never got to 11 Platoon. We never even got close enough to see 11 Platoon. Not that we got to identify anyway.
I was his platoon sergeant of 11 Platoon, and Gordon was on his hands and knees looking around to see where Charlie was, and he was only 30 metres away, and I'd said to him, if you don't pull your head down, you're going to get bloody killed. And he turned to me and he said, there's no one out there good enough, and next time he put his head up, he got shot straight to the throat.
A lot of us thought, what in the hell's going on here? Why are they coming at us? You know, and we could see that they were very well equipped, they were well dressed, they were regular soldiers, and not the pyjama-clad crew that we'd been told about.
Because, you know, there were a lot of tracer, and you could see the tracer. And an incredible volume of fire, you know, it really was. It's sort of fire, you felt if you stuck your head up, it'd get shot off for sure.
And subsequently, as the battle developed, we tended to protect ourselves behind Gordon's body, and you could hear the additional rounds hitting him, you know. That's how close they were.
The only thing that stopped them overrunning us early in the piece was the artillery that was coming in.
This was the first time in my experience that the Viet Cong had stayed around after the artillery, after the first encounter. They knew that they were well and truly within range of our artillery, and so they must have had some fairly evil designs on that company or on the task force.
And then, of course, the rain started.
Weather conditions were pissing down with monsoonal rain.
And I thought, you know, maybe the easiest way out of here is to attack straight ahead.
Well, from around about 5 o'clock in the afternoon through to about 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, the fire was continuous, and so the guns fired at a rate about every 10 seconds and 20 seconds. And that meant that landing on the battlefield around Delta Company was something like 800 pounds of high explosive every 10 or 20 seconds.
The sound and the whistling, the thumping of the ground, the shattering of shrapnel, it was deafening.
I took a run out to the extreme left of my section to try and get the men back into closer to the platoon headquarters, and I then saw that most of them were then dead.
You know, while the artillery was still coming in, and we still had voices on the radio, we knew that the rest of the company is still there, and there's no way that you're going to get up and stand up with a white towel and say, "Come and get me." You know, that just didn't enter in anyone's mind.
CO and Major Honour were looking at a map across the table, very worried. In fact, the operations officer, Major Passy, briefed me and told me to pick up A Company and get out to D Company and break up the attack. Drew the general location on my map, and that was my formal orders for the day.
When it started to get dark and visibility dropped to 25, 30 metres, I decided to take a run back, try and make a clean break and go, and then reconsolidate about 150 metres behind us.
This wasn't supposed to be happening, you know. This we were supposed to be giving these VC with a sandal and an old Mauser rifle a hiding, and here they were giving us a pretty good touch up at that stage.
I looked around, and most of my mates had gone and been shot, and I pulled a grenade from that I had there, and I thought, well, I wasn't going to go with them, so I had that ready, and I couldn't use the rifle, but I thought if there's one way out, we might have to use this.
And we knew we were having trouble with our weapons. We knew we were having trouble with the rain and the mud. And I thought that this is going to be it. You know, one more assault. We just can't feed the weapons the way we were at that stage.
And a very clear recollection to the artillery, you know, that certainly was an incredible thing to see. The artillery would come down behind the assault wave, and the second line just be wiped out like a pack of cards. Just wiped clean. And then we were, in each case, able to stop the assault wave with rifle fire. But that happened at least twice, two that I can remember quite clearly, two assaults like that, major, probably company-size assaults.
There in front of us was a complete company of infantry moving from left to right across our front in arrowhead formation, dressed in greens, packs on their back, and in the rain it looked as though they were part of, in fact I thought, it's D Company. About the same time as I had that thought, my right-hand carrier, Corporal Goss, called out on the radio, "It's the enemy," and opened fire.
I could say masses of enemy were approaching us, but I would say in the vicinity of 300 or 400 to our front.
We didn't hear the APCs arrive because of the artillery and the rain, but when they did arrive, it was just like one of those Western movies, I suppose, where the cavalry turns up.
Once the APCs arrived, there was no further firing.
Well, when we rolled in, some of the guys actually sort of stood up and clapped. I understand from one of my NCOs that one of the guys actually came up and sort of hugged the side of a carrier.
We hit the start line and we all got out of the tracks and sort of looked around, and so quiet. That was the thing. A few birds singing, that was all. And we started to focus on bodies and bits of bodies and more bodies, and it was started to hit everyone then.
The official count was 245 enemy bodies. I personally probably saw the best part of 100.
I was quite shocked when I saw the way my platoon was spread out in a straight line like they were, not moving, fingers on the trigger and still rounds in their rifles, that they were killed, squeezed off a shot or something like that. And Vic Rice, my operator, got killed as we withdrew, and he was shot through the chest, and he was sitting up there with the radio still working, with a smile on his face. It's something that I'll always remember. So it's not... I don't get upset about it today, but it's something that I always remember as the guys that were with me.
What dead we had recovered, we'd put in the back of an APC, and then with the movement of the APC over some 3,000 metres, when the tailgate of the APC dropped open, the bodies were all intermingled. I knew each and every one of them, and the boys were surprised and shocked to see their own in that position in the back of the APC.
We took 108, including 3 New Zealanders, into Long Tan, so 105 Australians, and we lost 18 dead, and I think the APCs lost 1 dead.
When we went back to the lines, and there was a couple of my 11 platoon people were there, and they were folding up the beds of those that had been killed and wounded, and it was very emotional to see the empty beds and the bunks being folded up.
The army car came down the road with an army man in it and the padre, one of the padres, and they came and knocked on the door. And her husband went out at first to answer the door, and he called me out, and I knew straight away something must have been wrong. But I mean, I couldn't cry. I didn't cry, I don't think, for nearly 3 weeks. I couldn't, you know, I was so numb. He was killed on the 18th of August, and that was an exhibition Thursday, and I was home minding half of the grandchildren. Then we didn't get the news until the Saturday morning. On the 20th, we got the news of his death. Oh, well, I don't know. I just think he should be home, you know, with us, instead of being where he was at the time. But, you know, it's just one of those things that happened, you know.
And I would like for every Aussie that stands there in the rice paddies on this warm summer day to know that every American and LBJ is with Australia all the way.
In the mid-1960s, the United States became convinced that the only way they could stave off defeat in Vietnam was to apply massive amounts of firepower on land, on sea, and by air. We didn't go as far all the way as the rhetorics implied to match the Americans proportionally in terms of population. The Australian effort would have had to have been about 3 times what in fact it was.
The Americans said we're a bit short on the ground for aircrew. And the Australian Defence Force looked around to see what it had, and of course there was a fairly large number of Australian Navy helicopter aircrew at the time. The EMU company, the 135th Aviation Company, was an infantry support company. The name EMU came from the Americans. They were very keen that they have an Australian bird, a bird that was aggressive and fast. What they didn't know, and when I told them, they were terribly disappointed that the EMU didn't fly.
The RAN deployed 4 ships to Vietnam during the period from March 67 until October 1971. Hobart was the first. It was followed by Perth and later by Brisbane and also by Vendetta. We were assigned naval gunfire support duties on the gun line, which is the operation which was conducted south of the demilitarized zone at that time.
All forward air controllers in Vietnam were assigned to the United States Air Force, which was based in Saigon, had its headquarters there. Our role was to locate the target, locate the position of friendly forces, and to mark the target for the fighter aircraft.
Then the aircraft puts a run in, and the bomb aimer is in the nose looking through a bomb sight and telling the pilot left, left, steady, right, steady, etc. And then running up to the target, the bomb's gone. And we took the simplistic view that every member of the enemy that we knocked over could save the lives of our own troops. And that was a very important message that was in all our hearts. And the squadron, really, that was our raison d'etre.
We Vietnamese would spend Tet at least 4 days celebrating Tet. The last day of the old year and the first 3 or 4 days of the new year. But because we Vietnamese practice what is called the cult of ancestors, it's also a religious affair.
Well, I was working for Reuters news agency, which is based at 85 Fleet Street, London, and I was wandering around covering the war, and I'd been there for nearly 12 months. So I was joining in the festivities, and they were bringing in truckloads of flowers, and the streets were lined with flowers, particularly the Nguyen Hue Street. And I was wandering around thinking how lucky I was that I had got through the Vietnam War without being killed.
People thought, well, obviously there'll be nothing happening now until after the holidays, and this was traditional because both sides observed a truce during the Lunar New Year.
Well, you would think that a truce would be an easy time for reporters, but, you know, news agencies love the story of when the truce is broken.
There was a very loud noise after we'd just gone to bed after a New Year's Eve party, and my wife said to me, "What was that noise?" Well, I was a military expert, and I immediately said, "Thunder." And she said, "That's not thunder, it's the dry season."
On the nights of January 30th and 31st, it was clear that the situation in Vietnam was drastically different. The Viet Cong simultaneously attacked just about every major city and town in South Vietnam. It was Tet, the Oriental New Year, and it was a new war.
The war came to Saigon early in the morning of January 31st. The first target was the symbol of the American presence in Vietnam, the United States Embassy.
I couldn't believe the scene that I saw because there were old black Citroen cars full of bullet holes up the side like in the movies, and there were dead American MPs next to their Jeep, and there were Americans behind every tree along the street opposite.
It was an attack. It involved about 10 persons who were all killed. But it only lasted about a day. But if you read American dispatches at the time, for about 2 weeks, there was nothing but that attack on the American embassy. There was nothing else.
Hue, the loveliest city in Vietnam, was burning. A great battle was fought not to defend Hue, but to retake it. When the counterattack came, almost all of Hue was in enemy hands.
This wasn't any normal firefight. This was something really on, and I thought, we'll blow this for a game of soldiers. What's going to happen next? There was a myriad of colours. There was tracer, there was artillery firing, there was anything that you could possibly think of in the weaponry system. They're all having their little go. Hue was the Rome of the Vietnamese, the hub of Vietnam. In my particular case, in my company, the men's homes were there. Their families lived in there. Our headquarters were in there. And the last news we'd got is our headquarters had been overrun. In fact, one of my platoons was wiped out in there when they were overrun. And this went on for 28 days, virtually, 27 days.
Well, at times it was as savage a fighting as you'll see anywhere. There was a lot of sniping going on. We linked up with the right of the American Marine Battalion that had been sent into Hue to try and clear it, and they were complaining about all the casualties they were taking.
You lost any friends?
Quite a few. We lost one the other day. The whole thing stinks, really.
Awful sick of it. I'll be so glad to go home. I don't know. It's the worst area we've been in since I've been in Vietnam.
The Arvin Battalion I was serving with was given the job of taking the area around the flagpole and removing the NVA flag that was flying
and to replace it with the South Vietnamese flag.
It was late in the evening, it was starting to get a little dark, and then there was nothing, just flares. And it was an indication that things had stopped. But it was quite dramatic. There was a definite pause. Everything went still. I think the thing that sticks mainly in my mind is the atrocities we uncovered when the population who were members of the population were deliberately assassinated, executed. I would say assassinated. Execute gives some legality to it. They weren't. They were assassinated by the North Vietnamese army.